Hello, thank you for tuning into my channel. Today we're doing an update on this vintage quilt that I finished. So if you want to see how we finished Grandma's quilt, please stay tuned. There have already been a couple of videos that I featured this quilt top in. I want to tell you a little bit of background in case you haven't seen those other videos, but I will link them in the description box. So this top was pieced by my grandmother. I'll put a picture of her here. Her name was Luella Simmons, and she passed away in 2016. So we found this in a bag with several other quilt tops, and I decided, since it's pretty big, I think it's probably about twin size finish, that I would go ahead and finish it up. So there are a couple of things that I did. First, I added a border. I'm going to zoom in. Hopefully you can see the border clearly over here. And it actually, if you look closely, it has two borders. One border fabric I already had, and the other one I purchased at a quilt store. And I tried to get it in a similar color and feel to the other. There's kind of a burgundy up in the squares, and so I tried to get it to kind of match that. And then so I put that border all around. I put the two borders, so there's a skinny border and a wider border. And then I decided that I would try to figure out how to quilt this. The top was mostly, or about half hand pieced and half machine pieced. So I tried to figure out the best way to quilt it, and I wanted to do it in a way that would honor the piecing, that honor what she put into it. So what I decided to do is for these the checkerboard type blocks, I've quilted those in the ditch. And so you won't be able to see it from the front at all, but I'll see if I can zoom in right here. I've quilted these patterns, each one of them, in the ditch, and then when it came to the sashing, I did free motion quilting. So I don't know if you can see it. Actually, the goal is for you not to be able to see it. I used a similar color thread. Okay, you can see it better in the yellow. So I used yellow thread for the yellow pieces, and then like a white or a cream thread for the other pieces. Okay, so you can see it over there. I've also, there is a pink sashing that she ended up using. I figured that she ran out of fabric at that point. And so for that one, I chose a light pink to do free motion quilting there. And even in the borders where I free motion quilted, I used a matching color. So it's like a dark red as well. Alright, and so you can't really see the quilting on the front, but when I flip it over in a second, you can see the quilting on the back. The way that I tried to deal with the quilting, I'm going to show you where I started, because it's not rotary cut or anything. It's just kind of make do with what you had, and so she did that. So I started by quilting this center block, and then I went out, out one way and then out the other way. So each time I tried quilting in the center first and then moving outward. And so I ended up changing thread and changing sewing feet on the sewing machine several times. So I started with the walking foot, and then I would switch to my free motion foot, and so on until I had the entire quilt finished. When it came to the backing fabric, I went to I was at the quilt shop already getting some other things, and I decided to draw from this green here. And when I chose a backing fabric, it is the highlight color, the main color is green, and it has some yellow. And this fabric was actually $3 a yard at the quilt shop, and so I bought 5 yards of it. And I felt like it had a similar feel, like it was kind of old school, and so I chose to quilt it with that. But then I ran out of fabric. I didn't have enough of the backing fabric, and so then I decided to use some denim that I already had. And I feel like this honors the spirit of the quilt, and the front of the quilt has some denim on it as well. And from here, you can see the quilting stitches a little better. You can see where I've quilted in the ditch here. And even when, let's see if I can zoom in here. Even when they didn't match up, like right there are a couple spots where it's not in a straight line, but I just went with whatever the stitch was. So sometimes I would have to break thread and scoot over a little bit to finish out the quilting with the walking foot. Again, I really feel like that honors the spirit of the quilt. You can also see the free motion quilting that I did. I just did stippling. I thought that it might be the quickest way to do it, and where I wouldn't have to think as much. And so I felt like that was really an appropriate way to do it. And I used, even though I changed thread on the top, I used all light gray thread on the back. So it doesn't exactly blend in, but it still looks nice to me. I really like it. Let's see, for the binding, and I'm going to show this as well. I'll show the whole quilt in just a minute, but I wanted to show, get some close-ups of it first. For the binding, since there is denim on the back and on the front, I did a mostly denim binding here. And then I also used some of my border fabric. But these things, the denim was already in my stash, so I didn't have to purchase that, which was good. So the only things that I actually ended up purchasing were the backing fabric, but it was $3 a yard, so I got 5 yards of it. And then I purchased this border fabric here. This fabric was already in my stash. I already had a lot of this, so I didn't have to buy more of it. But what happened was I ran out of the one that I purchased from the fabric store because I only got a yard, and I had enough of this that I could just finish it out. But I really like the way it turned out. I washed it afterwards, and I was excited that all the stitching held. I was nervous that I wouldn't be able to wash it and have all the hand piece. I was afraid that I didn't quilt it well enough and that the stitches would come out. But so far, so good. Nothing's come out. And but I wasn't able to get all the stains out. So this is a stain that was left probably from water damage where the quilt was stored. But I'm okay with that. I just, it's just it comes with the territory. It adds to the character of the quilt. So I'm just going to take this off the table, and then I'll put it on the floor so that you can see the whole quilt laid out. I'm really excited about it and proud of it. Oh, there's one other thing before we do that. I have, I put a tag on the quilt, and I want to show it. Let's see where it is. Right here. I've named the quilt Grandma's Baby, and even though everybody was Grandma's baby, I like to think that I have a special place in Grandma's heart. And then with the date that I finished it, and I also listed who it was pieced by, Mrs. Luella Simmons, who was my grandmother, and then the dates of her birth and her death, and then that I put the borders on it and quilted it. And then during this week that I was working on it, we had a death in our family. We lost my mother-in-law, and so I've just commemorated that here as well. So just as a memory that I did work on this quilt during a really hard time, and it brought me joy to be able to do this and honor two special people in my life. So I'm going to put it on the floor so you can see the whole thing, and I will be right back. We'll start with the back of the quilt first. This part is what I've pieced, and so you can see the floral fabric on the sides, and then I pieced it so that the denim was actually in the center, and then there was some on the side here that I also pieced on there. You'll notice that there is a curve right here on this side of the quilt, and that is where I decided that I would try to cut this side to make it even. It didn't really work out, but I was able to quilt I was able to quilt it outward instead of making pleats in the quilt for the most part. But when I flip it over, I'll show you where I cut it, and it's barely noticeable on the other side. It's much more noticeable on this side. Again, the only fabric I bought for this that was new was the floral fabric, the denim. I already had. I used that in another quilt. I used it in the quilt that I made for my mom for Christmas. So let's flip it over. I'm going to try to flip it so that the curve will be on the same side. And from this side, you can really see what I call the spirit of the quilt, where it was kind of use what you had. But even with that, I was able to, as I was quilting it, see some of my grandmother's creativity and style. Let me make it flat. Because as I was quilting it, I noticed that most of what's now the left side of the quilt, she sashed with white, and then most of the right side of the quilt she sashed with yellow. And so even though she was making do with what she had, she did still do it with a little bit of flair and kind of fashion sense. So there are 9 blocks in the quilt, and you can see the checkerboards and all the different colors, and you can tell like when she ran out of fabric, what she would kind of replace it with something else. And it looks like some of this might have been clothing fabric, some of it was upholstery fabric, lots of different things that came together for this quilt, and I'm really happy with the way it turned out. So if you have any questions about finishing a vintage quilt, this is my first one, but I have a couple more that need to be finished out, and I'll be working on those from time to time. If you have questions, leave them below. Please thumbs up this video and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you next time. Bye.